Inside of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 10 buffs and 10 nerfs which I want to see with the next set of balance changes. So there's more than likely not going to be any balances until the update in a couple of weeks time. So a good refresher, and hopefully someone from the Brawl Stars team is watching this, because there's some brawlers that are way too broken, and of course there's some brawlers that desperately need a rework of some kind. So of course, before we get into the video, make sure you subscribe already, getting close to 300k. Without further ado, let's hop into it. The first brawler I want to see a big nerf with, it is with Gale. So he's quickly became probably the best brawler in the game right now. There's like a bug or rework, I don't even know what it is, to his super damage. So essentially he deals like double the super damage pretty much all of the time. So going from 1,200 to 2,400 damage per super is insane. It means you can snipe people across the map, and that should not be able to happen. So they need to revert this back. They actually said they fixed this with the last set of balance changes, but I don't think they actually did. So removing this additional super damage would be the first step, and then maybe even nerfing his star power freezing snow by 0.1 seconds as well, because this star power is actually secretly broken. Next on the nerf list is Meg, and desperately she needs a nerf to her damage or just something. I'm unsure what route they want to take, because she was reworked recently to make her more fun, but the only fun thing about her is that she shreds through everyone. So you take away her damage, she won't be near enough as fun anymore, because it didn't actually rework her that much. But I think she does need a damage nerf, so they need to do that. Of course, probably taking her damage from 340 per projectile to 320, and then they should probably nerf her HP as well, because for whatever reason they added like 800 extra HP on top of her just to make her dumb broken. So reverting this back to 7,200, this should make Meg a lot more balanced. Next on the nerf list is Frank. So I don't think Frank is nowhere near as crazy broken upon his rework release, but he still is a little bit frustrating to face off against, especially when low HP. So I think they should actually nerf one of his things which were over-tuned, you know, like his HP, his damage. One of those should be adjusted accordingly, but I think they should just nerf his HP. Let's just face it, Frank's HP is just astronomical. It should go down from 14,000 to 13,000, or if they don't want to do this, they should nerf his hypercharge rate, because it only takes him 2.3 supers to get a hypercharge, which is just crazy. He can cycle through like 3 or 4 in a game. So one of these nerfs would be welcomed. Next, hopefully on the list is Berry. So he received a brand new trait, which of course is going to be a little bit difficult to balance, but it is way too strong. So you gain super from yourself healing or from your allies as well, and you only need 12 healing ticks to gain a full super. So of course this is a little bit overtuned. It should take around 16 healing ticks instead, and that will make Berry a lot more balanced, because right now he can just super across the map and just get infinite supers. So he definitely needs to be toned down just a little bit. Next, hopefully on the nerf list, is Clancy. So he is counterable in competitive play, but in terms of ladder, when there's so many tanks, his super rips through everything. So they need to change a couple of things. The first one is his super recharge rate from his super. So right now you can just spam supers galore, and it's pretty much impossible to face off against, especially if you're a tank. You'll literally shred through everyone, one-shotting every brawler inside of a game. So of course that's too strong. And then on top of this nerf, they should probably nerf his super damage as well, because right now his super is way too broken. Next up, hopefully on the nerf list, is Lily. So I think Lily isn't the most broken brawler right now, but the broken thing about her in her kit is definitely the Vanish gadget. This gadget, as you guys probably know, mechanically I absolutely hate it. I wish it never came into the game, but it's still here. So I'm hoping there'll be a rework in the future so we can just delete this. But for now, they need to either do a few things. Literally nerf it so it's only 1 second or 2 seconds, but then you might not be able to get any value from it. I don't know whether they want to go down that route, or they should literally make it so, I saw a lot of suggestions, make it so you can't actually use the gadget unless you're full HP perhaps, because the annoying thing about this gadget is that most people use it for survivability. So for example, you go in with Lily and you're one shot, you can just pop this gadget and run away, but at least if it's like a HP threshold, you can't just abuse this gadget 24/7. Next, hopefully on the nerf list, we have Kit. So I know Kit's a menace inside of duels and showdowns, so maybe they could do something with the attack damage or something with Kit, but I think the main problem is actually in 3 versus 3. Right now the Kit cheese combos are still way too boring, especially in knockouts. So instead of Kit healing 10% of the brawler's maximum HP, that is why tanks are just, well, Kit combines with tanks so incredibly well. They should nerf this to around around 8% or maybe even towards 5%. Maybe 5% is too small, but trust me, the healing synergies are just way too broken and there's nothing you can do. The game mode is just so dumbed down and it's because of kits, so we need to remove the kit cheese. Next, hopefully on the nerf list, we have Amber. So this is technically a bug, but it would go a long way into making her a lot more balanced. So if you guys didn't know, Amber's gadget deals 6k damage upon literally on the center of Amber when you first press the gadget, depending on whether you're true blue or true red. So if you guys didn't know, one team is automatically assigned this at the beginning of the game, but one of the Ambers on the team will have a 6k gadget. In pro play, there's actually a way of finding out who has the 6k Amber gadget, and that's broken because that affects the draft. You then can't, of course, go assassins into Amber. You know, for example, a lot of time, you know, Edgar would counter Amber, for example, but if you know the opponent has that 6k Amber gadget, you can't go Edgar into the Amber. So this is just fundamentally broken. It should be an easy fix, hopefully, and this will make Amber a lot more balanced. Next on the nerf wish list, we have Buster. So I know a lot of people will be angry at this, but I think Buster has been at the top for too long now. He's always a little bit slept on, but he's always in and around the S tier and way too strong in competitive play. I think he needs one of two nerfs. So they either need to nerf his main attack damage just slightly, because this actually affects his supercharge rate as well. So this would be the perfect nerf, or they need to look at his trait. So I think you get your super too quickly from teammates around you, and this promotes really defensive campy play, which you don't really want that in knockout. You know, for example, literally on maps like Flare and Phoenix, people just sit in the back with Buster and get their super for free, and I don't really like these traits in Brawl Stars. So nerfing this a lot would make it so you have to be more aggressive on Buster. And lastly on the nerf list, we have Rico. So it pains for me to say this as a Rico main, but I would like to see this gadget nerfed, because I don't like gadgets that are designed to literally hard counter your weaknesses. There's hardly anything you can do if you're a tank. It's a brainless gadget and it shouldn't do that amount of damage. So this got buffed some time ago, which just literally made this gadget so broken. It got nerfed last update, I believe, and it should probably get nerfed a little bit again. It deals near enough 900 damage now. Just tone it down to like 800. Let's try and find a sweet spot, because you shouldn't just be able to counter your weaknesses easily with a green button. You know, Rico is a little bit spammy right now. Probably does a little bit too much damage, but I think this is the first step, at least making it so he has a weakness. So now moving on to the buff, starting off with Grom. So Grom desperately needs a buff. He's never used in competitive, and I never even seen him ranked by the randoms, so he needs maybe one of two buffs. He either needs a slight damage buff, just so it means, you know, his shots are really difficult to land, so at least when you land them, it's actually worthwhile, and you might be able to two-shot free brawlers, or they need to buff his projectile speed just slightly. You don't want to overtune this too much, because in the past, it made Grom way too broken, but his shots are really difficult to land, especially with all the hypercharges and the stat boosts and everything like that. He's just way too difficult to use in a meta. So next with a buff is hopefully Doug. So Doug, he's been needing a rework for a very long time now. I think this should just completely rework this brawler. I don't know how, like just change his main attack or something, but for now maybe they can mess around with a few things. So of course you've got Berry with the healing trait, which was just introduced a month ago or so. I think this should be at least tested around with Doug, because at least then he can be a pocket heal and get a lot of value out of healing his teammate. Or we should add a tank trait to him, because right now Doug just gets melted. So at least when he gets melted, he's able to get a free super from that. I don't know whether that's going to be too toxic, or again, just a rework. Something needs to happen to Doug, because he's been useless since release. So next up on the buff list, or maybe even the rework list, we have Daryl. So maybe I need to make another section instead of buffs, because there's a lot of brawlers that need reworks, and Daryl's definitely one of them. So again, they should probably look at maybe buffing his trait a little bit, or reworking his trait to the tank trait, because I feel like waiting 30 seconds for a super is just way too long. But if you buff this number, it's too cheesy. Getting a free super, I just don't like that gimmick inside of Brawl Stars. So just get a super from taking damage. That's acceptable. At least when you roll in, you cycle through supers a lot more effectively with the tank trait in comparison to the automatic charging trait. Or we should just buff his roll distance. So again, I think a big problem with Daryl is that he's too predictable with his rolls. At least if you have a longer roll, there's more room to bounce it off walls, bounce it off opponents, and make more plays. I think that'd be a good rework to Daryl. So next up, hopefully on the buff list, we have Tara. So the boring way to buff her would just be by buffing her damage, but I think they do that way too much on all different lane brawlers in balance changes. I think they need a different buff, and it's to her star powers. So if you guys didn't know, with the rework to power 11 and all the changes to all the stats and everything else, the star power pets HP weren't actually buffed. So that means that everyone could just take down Tara's pets a lot more effectively. So I think they need to buff the HP of the Black Portal and the Healing Shade star power. So it means you get more value out of this, and it can actually be worthwhile star powers, because I think both of them are just terrible right now. Next on the buff list, we have Bonnie. So she's just sucked in the meta for a long time. Even since they buffed her supercharge rate, she's still been terrible. And I think a big problem is actually the fact that it takes so long to get back into your cannon form. So once you launch onto someone, it takes about 16 to 17 seconds to go back into your cannon form. Even if you deal damage to the opponents, this doesn't speed up this process. So even they need to make it so the amount of damage you deal, the quicker you can go back into your cannon form, or they just need to make it so it's around 14 or 15 seconds to go back into cannon form, because then she wouldn't be as vulnerable, and then it wouldn't mean just every time you jump in you just die automatically, right? You always get traded out. That is the big problem with Bonnie, so there's no point using her. She's too risky. Next on the buff for wish list, we have Penny. So Penny's a hard one to balance because she was one of the best brawlers in the game a year ago, and then they nerfed her and she became one of the worst brawlers, so she's always at the bottom or at the top. So I think just maybe buffing her super HP. Her cannon is currently at 5,600, buffing it to 6,600. So then it's the same amount of HP that Jesse's turret had. You got to remember, Jesse's turret, you can actually heal up as well. Whilst Penny's, a lot of the time, it can just be two-shot by a lot of different throwers. So I think this could be a good buff, and it won't make her as toxic. So next up on the buff wish list, we have Ems. So if you guys probably watch my second channel, you'd know that Ems is just a horrible brawler for me. She's good at the low trophy ranges, but in competitive play, she's pretty much useless. She doesn't actually deal that much damage, considering she's a tank counter. So I think we should do one of two things. We should either buff her hypercharge itself, because I think it's absolutely terrible, or we should buff her damage just a little bit, because she's a tank counter. She should rip through tanks, but she just doesn't. So main attack damage is currently 1,040. Maybe even buffing it by 40 and just seeing where that leaves Ems. The balance change that we actually need is with Hank. We need Hank to have 69,000 HP, and for his super damage to do 69,000 damage as well, he needs to be the best brawler in the game. So I actually want to see some buffs to Hank, so we should do one of three things. So the first buff I'd like to see is maybe a little bit more healing with his super, maybe like 55%, 60%, because still it takes a long time to cycle to that super. Or we should buff his super charge rate from his main attack, so it basically takes 4 fully charged shots to build up his super. Maybe make it like 3 and like 20% of charge, if you get what I mean, to build up that super. Or they should look at building up his minimum attack damage. Right now it's 1,050, maybe something like 1,250. So at least when you spam that minimum damage, especially like when there's a brawler on top of you, it's a little bit meaningful. Next up, hopefully on the buff list, we have Gus. So Gus has been pretty much forgotten since the Cookie Popper nerf over months ago, but now they should probably focus on making Gus more of a healer. So again, I'm asking for this since, you know, updates ago. They need to buff his healing with his ghost, so it's actually meaningful. People just use it for damage. So instead of 1,600 healing, buff it to like 2,000, 2,200, something like that, because you still have the problem that the ghosts are always spread out in weird situations. At least if you're able to pick up the ghost, it's a meaningful amount of healing, and I would like to see that with Gus. Next up, hopefully on the buff list, we have Squeak. So I actually want to hear your guys' suggestion on this, because I couldn't think of a way of buffing Squeak that makes him not toxic. So in the past, his residue gadget has been like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, been way too strong. In the past, his chain reaction has been 20% or whatever else. It's been way too strong. Also, his super sticky style power could also be buffed, so it's like 5 seconds something, but that could be too strong. His main attack damage getting buffed, that could be too strong, because Squeak is a really toxic brawler fundamentally. I don't know a way to make him actually balanced in the game. And lastly on the buff list, we have Sprout. Sprout sucked on ladder for a very long time, and that's mainly because he's easy to counter. But I would actually like to either see a main attack damage buff with Sprout, or a rework to his hypercharge, because hypercharge is one of the worst inside of the game. Fundamentally, it's just absolutely terrible. I'd actually like to see a different hypercharge. Maybe that just makes his super walls be twice the size. That would make Sprout a lot more viable. It can push the opponents back into, you know, really uncomfortable positions, and that's what it should be like with Sprout, not some terrible vines that do nothing. I'd like to see this. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.
Hello. What are you doing? Oi. Hello. What are you doing? Oi. Hello. Hello.